Today I'll be opposing the affirmative case in support of community policing as a solution to problems in law enforcement. While the affirmative side to this may present an idealistic vision of community policing, improving relationships between law enforcement and the communities they serve, the real-world practice reveals serious flaws. My rebuttal today focuses on three contentions. One is systemic racism obstructs the goals of community policing. 2, community policing often results in symbolic rather than structural change. And 3, rather than heal, it can divide communities and reinforce harmful surveillance dynamics. Systemic racism undermines community policing goals. The foundational problem with community policing is that it operates within a system already shaped by racial inequality. As Diaz asserts, racism, both institutional and individual, prevents law enforcement from treating all citizens equally, which makes meaningful community collaboration nearly impossible. This quote illustrates the core contradiction. How can a program centered on mutual trust thrive in an institution where unequal treatment is normalized? Community policing requires trust and cooperation, but as Diaz explained, Black and brown communities have long histories of being over-policed and underprotected. Rather than addressing this, community policing can act as a public relations strategy to manage dissent rather than correct injustice. Even the most well-intentioned community policing efforts are often collapse under the weight of systemic racism. Police departments continue to disproportionately stop, search, and arrest Black and Latino individuals, eroding any trust that community policing programs attempt to build. As Diaz notes, when communities believe police are not there to serve them equally, the foundational trust needed for community policing cannot exist. For my second contention, that community policing sometimes results in symbolic rather than structural change. Community policing is often promoted as a model of shared power. However, Gaskin and Russell challenged that assumption, revealing it to be largely symbolic. In their 2019 article, they argue, rather than yielding institutional authority to communities, community policing repackages traditional enforcement strategies with a friendly face. In essence, this is a branding exercise. Old policies in new packaging. Community members may be invited to attend forums or help plan block parties, but when it comes to shaping policy or holding officers accountable, their voices are excluded. Even worse, when marginalized residents do engage, they often are told how to assist police rather than be empowered to challenge them. This limits the transformative power of community policing. Gaskin and Russell argue that this leads to civilian oversight without actual oversight power, rendering the whole process more performative than effective. My third contention is that community policing can divide instead of unite. Community policing assumes a singular community voice, but that idea overlooks the complexity of urban neighborhoods. There's often no one unified community perspective. Race, class, and immigration status divide these neighborhoods, and community policing can exacerbate these divisions. Gaskin and Russell write, rather than facilitating unity, community policing programs often intensify divisions within neighborhoods, especially between Black and Latino populations who may be unequally policed or pitted against each other. For instance, in diverse neighborhoods, the police may rely on specific groups, often business owners or long-term residents, to act as informants or allies, when other groups, especially young Black and brown men, remain targets of suspicion. This dynamic fuels conflict, deepens racial bias, and corrodes any attempt at a true community collaboration. Further, these partnerships can debrutalize residents into roles of surveillance, encouraging them to report suspicious behavior which frequently aligns with racial profiling. In this way, community policing reinforces the very inequalities it claims to solve. In closing, while community policing is often marketed as a progressive reform, it is ultimately constrained by the very structures it claims to reform. Diaz and Gaskin and Russell provide compelling evidence that racism, power imbalances, and tokenism undermine the entire strategy. Trust cannot be built on the foundation of unequal treatment. Symbolic inclusion is not a substitute for real power sharing, and programs that divide communities or perpetuate surveillance cannot create justice. Real change requires more than neighborhood barbecues or civilian ride-alongs. It requires confronting and dismantling the structural racism embedded in policing itself. Until then, community policing will continue to fall short. Thank you.